Hello and welcome to The Voice of Iron, and in this session, we'll be reading Dreams of Rain, Tape 5. The sound of butter hitting the hot hibachi top filled my ears, as various smells of vegetables, meats, and fish rose in aromatic clouds around me. A still-faced man in more traditional garb spun the knife and tongs in his hands, repeatedly performing tricks as he chopped up and mixed the ingredients together in front of us. Mark and I were not alone at the table, and the sounds of awe from the dozen or so other patrons at our station occasionally rose above the loud clangs and sounds of cooking. And, a bit quieter than that, Mark laughed softly to himself, shaking his head at our conversation. "You mean to tell me you're gonna try and stick a bridge drive on an astrocar?" he asked, an incredulous expression across his clean-shaven face, made far more apparent thanks to the sparse, almost reddish lighting of the establishment. "I mean to tell you that I already did," I replied with a serious tone, only heightening his incredulity. "I mean, Kitt, you've always talked about wanting to see the stars, but there is a reason why they don't make astrocars with bridge drives." "That reason is size, mostly, and I got my hands on a prototype drive, much smaller, retrofitted the truck bed to serve as a drive area, and routed the Starlight power system through it," I explained, remaining calm, if mildly annoyed, as I went over it. He stopped laughing as he looked across my face, eyes scanning me for any signs of humor, or perhaps he was looking to see if it was a lie. Upon seeing neither was the case, he stared with a raised eyebrow. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," I said, being briefly interrupted by the chef speaking in one of the more common dialects. I held out my plate, and he slid a healthy portion of rice onto it, bits of chopped egg and vegetables intermittently breaking up the brownish-white texture of the rich-smelling stuff. As Mark was served, he simply nodded in thanks, seemingly uninterested in eating it yet. I, on the other hand, wasted no time snapping open the chopsticks and getting to work. "Kid, look, I know you're great with astrocars, but you aren't a physicist. How do you know it'll work? And how will you guide it?" he questioned, leaning closer. "It has plenty of power for one jump. Besides, I have a tape to jump me to Jiu," I admitted through mouthfuls of rice. He sighed, narrowing his eyes. "I'm just gonna ask if I should know where you got it, given my profession." He tugged lightly at his uniform as he asked, and I let out a breath, using the rice as an excuse not to answer. I simply shook my head, no. "Well then how can you trust a tape like that? And what if the bridge doesn't make it?" "Mark, are you off duty, or is this your lunch hour?" I asked, checking the time. He responded promptly, as was his style. "Off duty. Why? What are you planning?" "Need a ride home?" We arrived at the garage an hour later, walking carefully towards the center of the crowds. Having a uniformed Astra security officer with me certainly helped to dissuade attacks, but with some of the crazier gangs down here, it was never a guarantee. Mark made sure his cyber arm was visible, and he kept it close to his chest as we walked, as further deterrent. All this helped us arrive scratch-free, and after punching in the security code, we stepped into the pod that contained Blue 1. The light gleamed off her hull as the angles near the roof and hood really caught the light. It was an elegant shape, painted, of course, in a nice stellar blue, with the exception of the latest edition. Mark said nothing, as he'd seen her without the drive on her before, but now she looked like an elegant Astro truck with an enormous cube stuck on the back. "You said you secured that?" Mark asked me, sounding very concerned. "Secured, anchored, and stuck thanks to the hooks and electromagnets of the truck bed, plus some tracks I installed," I boasted, running my hand across it. I unlocked her doors, hearing the faint, pressurized hiss as they opened, and I climbed inside. "Well, hop in, she won't bite," I joked, getting my straps on properly. Mark had been in that passenger seat hundreds of times over the course of our friendship, yet he seemed ever so slightly less inclined to get in this time, as he slowly stepped in and triple-checked the restraints. He wasn't the jumpy type, but I could have sworn his chrome-colored fingers twitched as the door slammed. As the safety seals on the doors hissed and refilled, I began the activation procedure. Engine on, main power on, oxygen on, all systems green. I felt her smoothly start up, and after popping in my music cassette, I radioed the garage to let us out. I felt the pod containing us rotate towards the launch pad, halting as we got to the top of the garage tower, where the only thing standing between us and the nearest star lane was that EMAG shield. I flew us gently through it, and as soon as we were out of tower range, punched the thrusters, soaring towards the main star lane above. As we merged between the great octagonal frames of the lanes, I straightened us out and got into a more relaxed pose. "You know I hate it when you do that, right?" Mark asked, getting a laugh out of me. Sorry. I know. I just like to strut what she's got, you know?" I replied, activating the stabilizers and turning down the music so we could talk as we flew. "But you see, she's as fast and safe as ever. Nothing to worry about," I began, leaning back in the seat. "Kid, I never doubted your maintenance abilities. I get that. I'm more worried about the drive itself. How did you even get it? Who made it? How powerful is it? Why risk using this thing to test it?" I pondered each of his questions for a moment before calmly asking, "Would you believe me if I told you my answer was, I don't know, to just about all of those?" He scoffed, leaning back. "Great, fantastic," he shouted, shaking his head. "Then why? Why take so many risks? Is it really worth it?" he asked me. I thought for a moment. I stared at the mostly empty star lane and took a deep breath. "I want to escape," I said plainly, not taking my eyes off the space in front of me. "There has to be more if it's potentially worth your life," he prodded, genuine curiosity in his tone. "Let me ask you a question. How long have you worked for the security forces?" I opened. "Me? 7 years. It's a good job," Mark responded. 7 years. And how long until you retire?" "Retire? That's a long way off, but about 23 more years at the earliest. I could go 33 if I really wanted to," he relayed, tone remaining calm. "And that's well and good, but your job is just one of many that keep you well into your middle age, if not later years, and unless you can afford regeneration treatments, there's very little hope in the way of starting fresh. You and I, we're both 25, right? Most people work twice as long as we've been alive in the more common jobs, and the most common jobs around here are mining, be it collecting from the nebula, as a worker in the processing plant, or digging in the nearby asteroids," I explained, feeling a bit like I was lecturing. "That's how jobs work, kid. You pick a career and you go with it. What's your point?" Mark prompted further. "Pick a career, as long as it's an Asterisk job here in the colony." How many people actually leave Novus Colony, Mark? And I'm not counting retirees on vacation. How many? Other than shipping drivers, who, by the way, are almost all based out of a different planet or colony from this one, leave. "Not many. True, but it's not impossible to leave," he offered, seeing the path I was taking. "Not impossible? Sure, technically it isn't, but tell that to the millions in the Undercity you patrol every day. My point is, I don't want to be born, grow old, and die here in this one megacity when people have gone all over the galaxy. I want to go out there. I want to feel real rain on my skin, on a planet," I concluded, with voice raised near the end, sighing as I finished the rant. "I just want to escape." There was quiet between us as my music tape played softly from the console, only aiding in the contemplative mood that had been set. "All right, kid. I can accept that. I've known you long enough to know how dedicated you are to finding a water planet, at least. But strapping a bridge drive to Blue 1? Is that really the best way to do it?" he inquired. I thought, glancing over at him as I turned off the main star lane and took the express lane towards Sunset Station, slowing it down on the relatively empty lanes, passing glowing star lane markers and buoys as we flew. "Say, Mark, tell me again about your arm," I mentioned, gesturing with an elbow towards his mechanical arm. "Again? Well, whenever you sign up for the Force, and after you get accepted in, each member of Astra's security forces is required to get at least one Omnitech upgrade or implant. It's one of the contracts Astris made with Omnitech a while back in exchange for some intercorporate cooperation or something. I chose to replace my arm since I wasn't exactly the most stable shot, plus plenty of utility options in this model," he summarized, rotating his wrist 360 degrees to accent the point, running his hand over the chrome-colored finish. His fingers traced the skeletal details of the arm as he told me about it. "And this addition, how did you feel about it then versus now?" I asked, listening intently. "At first, it took some getting used to. Fell asleep on the table with both arms, woke up with this thing. But honestly, not only am I one of the steadiest shots on the force now, but all the gizmos and gadgets inside have helped me plenty of times. There's a built-in palm jet, a basic cutter, and an electromagnet for disarming purposes. Not to mention enhanced strength. I'd say I feel great about it now, he elaborated, squinting as he finished the speech. Why do you ask? Well, I see this drive a lot like your arm, in a sense. The human body isn't made for cyber parts, but the doctors and engineers can graft it on just fine. Just the same, an Astrocar might not be made for bridge drives, but I got it on pretty well. And what starts out as a strange new addition can eventually serve to be a great benefit, if done right. I explained, nodding my head. If done right, Mark repeated simply, as we drove the rest of the way home. No longer speaking, we sat, simply listening to the music and the hum of Blue One's engines. That concludes today's reading, and thank you for listening to my voice.